Welcome to Beautiful Thrift Homemaking. I'm Linda, and we're reading through a vintage novel and cookbook from 1917. It's called A Thousand Ways to Please a Husband. We're in the month of September right now, and we are going to read chapters 53 and 54 in our story. It's an ongoing story about a newlywed named Bettina and her husband Bob, and what Bettina does in the kitchen as she prepares her meals, and she gives us her recipes, and we'll discuss those and take a look at what homemaking was like in 1917. All right, so chapter 53, Dinner at the Dixons. Is it still as much fun to keep house as it was at first, Charlotte? Asked Bettina as she and Bob sat down to dinner with the Dixons. Fun, said Charlotte. Bettina, look at me. Or better still, look at Frank. And the funny part of it all is that Aunt Isabel thinks our keeping house is a result of her preachments against boarding and hotel living. Why, she quite approves of me now, and I'll just keep quiet and let her feel that she was the one who did it. But all the while in my heart, I'll be remembering that it was the sight of your happiness that roused my ambition to make a home myself. I tell you, said Mr. Dixon, we can never thank you enough, Bettina. Now, shall I play Home Sweet Home on the piano, and will you all join in the chorus? Not if you sing too, said Mrs. Dixon, smiling at her husband's foolishness. I've learned a great deal from you since I began, Bettina, and not the smallest lesson is that of having company without dreading it. I don't try to make things elaborate, just dainty and simple food such as we have every day. Why, tonight I didn't make a single change for you and Bob, and I don't believe I should dread even Aunt Isabel's sudden arrival now. Aunt Isabel is really a good soul, Bettina, said Frank. Charlotte has never learned how much worse her bark is than her bite, and she takes it to heart when Aunt Isabel speaks her mind. Why, I remember so well the scoldings she used to give me when I was a boy, and the cookies she would manage to treat me with afterwards. I used to anticipate these pleasant scoldings. If a scolding always comes before food, said Bob, Charlotte must have given you an extra good one before inviting us to partake of that delicious-looking chocolate pie. That evening they had cold sliced ham, creamed potatoes, tomatoes stuffed with rice, peach butter, chocolate pie, and coffee. And in this chapter, we have the recipes for the tomatoes stuffed with rice, the chocolate pie crust, the filling for it, and the meringue for the top of it. All right, so emphasis on dessert there, right? Chapter 54, A Goodbye Luncheon for Bernadette. Big success was what Bettina's eyes telegraphed to Ruth across the purple and white asters in the center of a long porch table. Ruth was giving a farewell luncheon for Bernadette, her young cousin, who was leaving that night for a fashionable New York school. Although there was no suggestion of it in the dainty dishes the two girls served to the hungry and vivacious young guests, Ruth was trying out her cooking with all of the stage fright of a beginner. The recipes and suggestions were chiefly Bettina's, and the two had been busy in Ruth's kitchen since early that morning. Bernadette was a critical young person, although light-hearted and affectionate, and Ruth felt that she could set her humble efforts before no sterner judge. Yet all the while, as she tasted each course in its turn, her mind was running on. Will Fred like this? Someday I'll be serving this to Fred. It was certainly a satisfaction to feel oneself able to cook a luncheon acceptable to the younger society set. With each course, an enormous motto, supposedly of the Don'ts for Schoolgirls' series, was brought in ceremonially on a tray and suspended from the chandelier over the table until finally 5 huge, if foolish, don'ts were dangling there for Bernadette's inspection. With the last course, Ruth, in the postman's hat, coat and bag, brought in an endless supply of letters for Bernadette to be opened at such times as when you meet your impossible roommate, when you feel the first pangs of probably says homesickness. Let me turn the page. Yep. When reprimanded by a horrid old teacher, when forced to mend your own stockings, etc. Bernadette seized them all delightedly, glanced at the covers, and cried out, half in laughter, half in tears, "Oh, girls, I simply can't go way off there. I'll die." Her friends fell upon her with scoldings and hugs, and in the midst of the noise and clamor, Ruth and Bettina slipped out to laugh and talk over Ruth's first serious culinary effort. The menu consisted of iced cantaloupe balls, chicken croquettes, potatoes in cream, green peppers stuffed with corn, rolls, peach pickles, cherry salad, wafers, chocolate cream pudding, and coffee. And in this chapter, we have the recipes from Bettina for the chicken croquettes, the green peppers stuffed with corn, the cherry salad, and the chocolate cream pudding. All right, so join me and we will discuss these two chapters and look over the recipes and see what you think. All right, let's discuss chapters 53 and 54, shall we? Oh, but first, I want to make sure that you're staying hydrated, and I need to work on that myself. You know, something I want to talk to you about. Let me turn my book over. It's falling off my lap. I am not that much of a fan of hot tea. I hate to say that. I know it has such a romantic notion, but I had a jar of tea bags. This jar here was full of tea bags, miscellaneous assorted tea bags. Do you have one of those types of containers, a container in your house full of tea bags? Or maybe you have a whole bunch of boxes full of tea bags, or half full of tea bags, partially full of tea bags, and so forth. And you wonder, when are these ever going to get out of here? I don't want to throw them away. I don't want to be wasteful, right? Well, I decided that I just love iced tea. I like flavored iced teas. I like all kinds of iced teas. I don't mind drinking tea if it's iced. So what I've done, as you can see, I've almost worked through all my tea bags there. The ones that are left I have 2 mint teas left, and those are great iced. And then I have my daughter's tea that she likes to drink hot in the winter, the sweet and spicy kind. It's kind of like a cinnamon tea, and she likes that one. And I have another box of that one up there. So I think what I'm going to do is empty the new box of that into this jar and have that out for her this winter so she can have her hot tea. And then I will have cleared out all my miscellaneous tea bags, and I'm just so happy about that. So cheers. This one has like a lemon type tea in it with mint, and I mixed those 2 tea bags together for this one. So we're still hot here in Northern California until probably around the end of October, but as I said, we do have signs of fall, and the weather is cooling off quite a bit in the mornings and evenings. Also, that's nice. Yeah. All right. So back to our book. Dinner at the Dixons. That was fun because we know that Charlotte and her husband, who they often just refer to as Mr. Dixon, they had lived in a hotel. Charlotte was raised living in a hotel. You know, even boarding homes were a housing of choice for some people, or maybe even by default because they had no choice because it was more affordable. But she had been raised in a hotel and hadn't learned any homemaking, so Bettina's been guiding her, and then she invited over Bob and Bettina to have a meal, and Mr. Dixon, you notice, is going to play the piano and ask them to sing. We noticed in our chapter from the 4th of July that they were also singing together. That was a common pastime in the good old days, right? People would sing together to fill their hours, because right now, because right now we have other ways of being entertained, such as television, and many people play video games and so forth, occupying themselves on their phones, so they don't participate in community or family evenings in which there's some need to look for group activities. So this singing was one of those types of things. It's common for somebody to be able to play a piano, and just for people to just chime in and sing along together. So Home Sweet Home was the song he was going to play. I liked the fact that Charlotte said that it was Bettina who inspired her to become a homemaker. And she said that her Aunt Isabel had been disappointed that she was living in a hotel with her husband, and that now that Charlotte is making a home, Aunt Isabel is pretty happy with her and thought that she caused that change of affairs. But no, Charlotte's revealing to us that it was Bettina. And I was wondering, who are you inspiring? Are you being a role model of a homemaker? Are you being a mentor to a young woman who needs some guidance in homemaking? So think about your life and those in your circle and who you come in contact with, or who you could come in contact with and inspire. Okay, so many of the youth today need to have some help learning homemaking. And then we're going to look at that menu. And Mrs. Charlotte Dixon says that she was happy to feed her guests with what she was making for her and her husband. And so we'll look at those recipes. Tomatoes stuffed with rice. All right. So you cook the rice ahead and you hollow out the tomato. Chop some green pepper, grate a little bit of cheese, chop an onion, but just use a teaspoon of it in this recipe for 6 portions. And then some salt and butter. What is the butter for? Let's see. Place a small dot of butter on top of each before it goes into the oven to bake for 25 minutes. All right. Now the chocolate pie crust is not a chocolate pie crust. As we know, we do have chocolate crusts these days, but this is a crust for a chocolate pie. And we've covered crusts before. She's making hers just with lard as her fat in the recipe. And then the filling is 1 cup sugar, 5 tablespoons flour, an 1/8 a teaspoon of salt, 2 cups of milk, 2 eggs, 1½ squares of melted chocolate, and 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. She says mix well the sugar, flour, and salt. Add gradually the milk and beaten egg yolks. Cook in a double boiler 15 minutes. Add the melted chocolate. Cook until thick, about 10 minutes, and add the vanilla. Fill the baked shell and cover with meringue. Place in a moderate oven and cook until the meringue is a delicate brown, about 5 minutes. So you may have had lemon meringue pie. I don't know about you, but that's a favorite of mine. I rarely have it. And then this is a chocolate meringue pie, and a meringue is made with egg whites, and I'll tell you about that. 2 egg whites and 4 tablespoons of sugar. Beat the whites of eggs very stiff. Add the sugar. Pile lightly on the chocolate mixture. Brown in the oven. Chocolate pie should be served cold. Okay, this chocolate pie like this is really kind of a pudding, isn't it? A pudding pie. All right. So I was going to say something else about that. I was going to mention the double boiler. Why use a double boiler? Remember that keeps your ingredients cooking on the stove a little further from the flame and keeps them from burning easily. Things that burn easily can go that way. All right. Chapter 54, A Goodbye Luncheon for Bernadette. We have Bernadette as the young cousin of Ruth, and she's going off to school in New York. And apparently there's a tradition in 1917, some sort of series of don'ts for schoolgirls. And so they had a little, the motto of, with some tips hanging there for her to look at and to decorate with. And then I liked this, what they did for her. They wrote letters to encourage her with different situations that they presumed she would come in contact with at some point. And those were rather humorous, weren't they? When you meet your impossible roommate, when you feel homesickness, the first pangs of homesickness, when reprimanded by a horrid old teacher, when forced to mend your own stockings. Okay, so remember, this is probably a society girl used to being waited on and having people do things for her. And she just was delighted, but did feel a little pang of sadness about leaving her friends, her young friends. So Bettina and Ruth, exit to the kitchen and laugh about the girls and their ways. So she's having chicken croquette. Chicken croquettes are, of course, they mix up chopped chicken with some seasoning and parsley, and they make a white sauce for it. Croquettes, again, have appeared multiple times in our book. They are a mixture of meat and so forth. Depends on what you're making it with, but a mixture of things that are chopped up together and then rolled in breadcrumbs and deep fried. So that's what happens here with the chicken croquettes. And then the white sauce in this case is mixed in with the croquettes, not the croquettes aren't served with the white sauce. All right, then the green peppers are stuffed with corn. It's kind of like the stuffed tomatoes with rice. In this case, they're stuffing a green pepper. And of course that includes a little bit of egg and a little bit of breadcrumbs too. Then there's a cherry salad. So that is 2 cups of California cherries, a half a cup of hazelnuts, 6 lettuce leaves, and 6 tablespoons of salad dressing. Remove the seeds from 2 cups of California white cherries and fill with filberts or hazelnuts. Arrange on crisp lettuce leaves and serve with salad dressing. So these are nut-stuffed cherries. Have you ever had that? That sounds very interesting. Chocolate cream pudding is also served. And this is similar to a pudding that I make at home. 2 cups of milk, 5 tablespoons of cornstarch, 1/2 a cup of sugar, 1/4 a teaspoon of salt, 1½ squares of melted chocolate, 3 tablespoons of hot water, and 2 egg whites, and then 1 teaspoon of vanilla. I'm going to mix the cornstarch, the sugar, and the salt together. Add cold milk gradually, mixing well. I would use a whisk for that. Melt the chocolate in the hot water and add it to the other mixture. Cook in the double boiler 10 minutes, stirring occasionally. Beat for 3 minutes. Add the stiffly beaten white and the vanilla. Mold, chill, and serve. If the chocolate does not melt in the hot water, cook over the fire a minute. Whipped cream may be served with the pudding. Okay, so this is familiar in my family, which is unusual because most of the recipes aren't familiar to us. But a friend of mine did share with me a chocolate pudding recipe that she made when we were visiting her home one night, and she served us dinner, and that was the dessert. And her daughter, who was probably around, well, she had to stand on a chair to stir the pudding on the stove when she was making it. So her daughter was the one who made the pudding for us for dessert, and I have had that recipe ever since. And her daughter's now almost finished with school, becoming an RN. So time does fly. Hopefully you enjoyed the recipes and the chapters. we'll see you next time. I'm looking at my notes. I think I covered everything, and I hope you're having a great day. We'll check out the next chapters very soon. Thank you.